Chairman, thank you. Secretary Perdue, welcome. I want to start my time to applaud your efforts to relocate NIFA and ERS outside of Washington, D.C. I believe that government offices that are located closer to people, the people they serve, is a positive thing. And I reject the argument of some that something outside the national capital diminishes its value to farmers and to the country. Kansas City, the city that splits the border between Senator Blunt and I, has 5,000 USDA employees today. And to say that their value to the country is something less than an employee within the department in Washington, D.C., is offensive to me. And so there are good people doing good work across the country. And I'm happy to see you pursue this. I would ask you if you would provide an update on this topic, where we are. Funds in this budget affect this decision. And the things that you and we can do to make sure that those employees have, those locations have all the staff and training and necessary components to fulfill their jobs.
Well, thank you very much for your support, Senator. I really have been a little surprised with the naysayers on this. I would love to understand more about their issues. About 90% of USDA employees are outside the national capital region. You mentioned Kansas City. We got a great firm there, Minnesota, New Orleans, and many other places across the country doing a great job, Ames, Iowa. And we've had 139 expressions of interest. That's been winnowed down to a middle list. We hope to have sort of the finalists within probably a 3-week time period where we'll begin actual negotiations, which will allow us to provide a cost-benefit analysis, a real benefit analysis for you all as the appropriators to determine. My goal is to treat this as an economic development project, much like it was always used against me when I was governor. 600 or 700 federal jobs is a pretty good plum for economic development. So we expect to get some good proposals here, and we'll go back to those few finalists here and ask for their last and best offer in that regard. If I can't bring a deal to you that I think makes sense, then I wouldn't expect you all to approve it. But I think we'll find some real interest out there that begins to help in the reasons that we began to think about this, as far as quality of life and people recruiting some of these young PhD with families outside where they can live a better quality of life.
Mr. Secretary, please consider me an ally in that effort. Also, please consider me an ally. I've offered to the White House and to the USTR, to the Trade Ambassador, to provide whatever leadership I can in support of USMCA's approval by Congress, and I would make the same offer to you. Please put me to work. It is a trade agreement that is of significance. I would make the pitch one more time that we should not withdraw from NAFTA until USMCA is approved. And I would ask, assuming that you agree with me, that you would convey that to the administration.
We have and will continue to advocate very strongly for that position.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I recently toured flood damage in Kansas with our FSA State Director. The floods that occurred, at least initially in Nebraska, have worked their way down to the northeast corner of Kansas. I'm watching the weather this weekend, in which South Dakota is to get 18 to 24 inches of snow. We know that the last flood we had in Kansas of this magnitude occurred in July. This one's occurring in March. There's a lot of rain, spring rains, and a lot of snow melt yet to come. I would ask you just one specific question at the moment about this topic. Could you provide me either today or in the near future the most up-to-date estimate of the ECP budget shortfall, and would you and the department support funds being appropriated to cover the backlog?
The answer to the second question is absolutely, we'll support that. The first question is we don't know yet. The assessments take a while with the floodwaters receding, and as you indicated, potentially even more coming with snow and snow melt coming down. It could be greater. So we don't have good assessments of that currently. We're working with our state partners, both in the state and our federal FSA and NRCS officers across there. If there's a shortfall in that, the good thing about it on the livestock indemnity program, you all lifted the cap on that. So that's helpful to many people that will lose a good amount of livestock in those areas. and we're prepared to support that. But if there's shortfalls, we will certainly advise you of what we assess the damage to be and ask for what's needed.
This may be, Mr. Secretary, we think will be the most important program for farmers and ranchers damaged in Kansas will be ECP, and there's already backlog in that effort. And we've always funded ECP and filled the shortfall. We're trying to do so in the emergency appropriation bill, and we could use your help in accomplishing that.
Well, I hope we can also get the disaster bill out, which would backfill that ECP need in the watershed issues and correcting those stream banks and, you know, the flooding. And I'd never seen the ice associated with the flooding the way it apparently happened here with huge ice blocks that can just carve and really destroy stream beds.
I agree. Never seen anything like it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you. Let me go back to something the chairman said, talking about food aid, and I just would highlight, unfortunately, there are 4 famines ongoing around the world today. I want to particularly talk about McGovern-Dole, or as we say in Kansas, Dole-McGovern food program. Every year that this program has been zeroed out, which is every year in the last 3, the explanation is unaddressed oversight and performance monitoring challenges. Mr. Secretary, if those, I say this with a smile, but if those really exist, fix the problems, don't zero out the account. And this is an important program to our country, its farmers, but most importantly, it helps lots of young people be fed around the globe, and I would encourage department support. In fact, I visited with you and with others about, I remember showing you a pile of grain in front of an elevator from 2 harvests ago that hasn't been marketed yet, and then we learn and know that there's people who die every day because they don't have food, and we ought to do a better job of connecting the two. In a more specific issue, I know that a month ago the effort began to hire a new director at the National Bioagri-Science Laboratory. This position, I hope you would share my view, is absolutely critical to the future of this project. And I'm curious as to where we stand on the recruiting effort. I hope that was more than just an announcement that you're hiring. I hope that you've been out encouraging individuals to apply, people with certain kind of characteristics, backgrounds, and intellect. Tell me where we are in that regard, please.
We're not as far along as I would like. Our recruitment efforts have not been as aggressive as I would like, and we've had discussions recently about that, about fulfilling that. It's a beautiful facility coming along well. We appreciate the transfer of the appropriations from DHS to here, but it can't run without the right people, and I know that I share your concern about that.
If you don't know at the moment, would you let me or my staff know how many positions beyond the director are posted and remain open?
We will do that.
Thank you very much. Then let me visit just a couple more issues. In the last Farm Bill, we were successful in including legislation called Farmers First. This deals with suicides among producers. This committee provided $2 million in fiscal year for the 2019 network. Can you speak to the importance of rural mental health services to fill in the gaps in what is currently available to those farmers and ranchers? I'm looking for an update on the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistant Network.
Well, certainly, as the anxiety, as the stress develops in the farm sector based on low prices, we see more and more of that. We also see opioid addictions as well, leading to opioid addictions or suicides or deaths by overdose. So this is an important effort, and rural development is heading this up, and it's always sad to hear things in places where you're unsuccessful, but we understand the need to have a network out there with call lines and helps, and hopefully we can continue to do that.
Please make this a priority, along with all the many other priorities that you have at the department. The 2018 Farm Bill directed USDA to do a feasibility study on dealer statutory trust within a year. Do you anticipate that USDA will be able to provide that study to Congress at that time?
I do, certainly within a year. That gives us plenty of time to understand how the dealer trust applies to other types of similar situations we have with livestock and others to do that. I think we'll have that gives us plenty of time to have a good proposal for you going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.